As I mentioned earlier, today we have Brooke Carter. She comes from Uber, and she's going to be talking about machine learning and how to manage that program. What's also interesting about Brooke is that she published a book on how called Profreshional, and I kind of wanted to invite her also to share briefly about her book, because I found it super fascinating, the little that I checked it out. So Brooke, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk about the book before we dive into machine learning?
Sure. Thanks so much, Marco. Hi, everyone. I'll have a slide, so some of this, the bullet points might get repeated. You'll be sick of my story by the end of this. But I'm based in Seattle currently. I am the program manager of machine learning education at Uber, but my career experience to date is rooted in previously technical recruitment and then technical project management for global data science and machine learning teams. Throughout my career, one kind of pressing theme remained during my first few years, and that's that the whole working thing's a lot harder than I initially realized, and I know that I'm certainly not the only person in that boat. So I wrote a book called Profreshional. The subtitle is A Guide to Surviving the Freshman Year of Your Professional Life. And it's a lot of to-dos and a lot of to-don'ts on navigating the corporate world, specifically in your first few years, whether you're a recent graduate or maybe returning to the workforce and want an up-to-date, hopefully very pragmatic and realistic view on how to navigate the corporate world in today's environment. But that's it. I think Tomomi generously sent the landing page to my site if you're curious about Profreshional and want to know more.
Yay, awesome. And I know people are already asking for autographs, so we'll have to arrange that.
Yeah, maybe we'll raffle one off at the end. The best question. All right, with that, I guess, should I share my screen, Marco?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
you're on.
Great. All right, and can we see the screen here? Perfect. All right, so jumping in. Thanks so much. I want to kick off with a few thank yous. First and foremost, thanks to TechKnowCon for the opportunity and the platform. Thank you, Marco and Tomomi, for your partnership in bringing this event over the line and all of the effort that's gone in to making this happen today. And then thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy days and volunteering for another Zoom meeting on your calendar. So it's much appreciated, and I hope that you find this session of value. Today's presentation is titled How Uber Uses Education to Scale Machine Learning. And I have a pretty jam-packed slide deck for you, so I'm gonna breeze past these introductory slides, so forgive me in advance if I move pretty quickly. The primary purpose of today's session is just information sharing. So I'll be slightly informal, but just hopefully sharing a bit about our story of scaling out a full-scale machine learning education program, and allow for some time for Q&A at the end. So like I mentioned already, a bit about who I am. Something I didn't mention that I think is worth noting is I'm a proud hamster mom. Go Brenda. I should have put a picture of Brenda on the slides, but just a fun fact there. Moving on to today's agenda. So I have 5 sections of content prepared for you all. First, we'll go through motivations for establishing an investment in machine learning education. We'll then move into what the program looked like when we were first getting started, because I think what the program needed and how it looked in its early days varies greatly from what it looks like and needs today. So wanted to split that up into 2 very distinct sections. In this getting started section, we'll also introduce engineering principles that are embedded into the program's design, which I think is a differentiator for how we have scaled machine learning education at Uber. We'll then take a look at what the program looks like today. We'll move on to section 4 and discuss some outcomes and metrics that have been realized year to date. We'll close with a few high-level takeaways and then devote the rest of the time to Q&A. I hope that you find a ton of the information useful and you retain much of it, but in case you don't, the high-level learning objectives that I'm hoping all audience members will walk away with is an understanding of, first, how Uber is using education to scale ML, And second, the benefits of applying engineering principles to the design of tech learning solutions, whether it be full-scale courses, programs, docs, things of that nature. And lastly, from kind of an introductory housekeeping perspective, I wanted to define some terms for you all up front, just because I realize I might be throwing around some Uber-specific vernacular and want to make sure we're all on the same page. So of these terms, I just want to note on the first two, because I think they're the most critical to lock in. Michelangelo. When I say this, I'm not talking about the artist. I am referring to Uber's internal machine learning development platform. A theme throughout is Uber does machine learning differently, and you'll hopefully get a clear glimpse of how that is later on. But Michelangelo is really a quick way to summarize how we are doing ML differently. We have an internal development platform, and it requires a lot of new user onboarding. Then secondly, when I say user, I might say participant, I might say user, I might say customer. Those are used somewhat interchangeably. I'll try to be consistent and use user to reduce cognitive load, but know that I'm speaking about the target audience of the machine learning education programs, learning solutions when I say user. So I'm speaking about people that I'm helping market our education solutions to. So with that, I'm going to jump right into Uber's motivations for investing in ML education. Dara Khosrowshahi, Uber's CEO, once described the company as a giant machine intelligence problem. I really like this quote because I think at a very high level, it does a good job summarizing why the company would think investing in formal education within the machine learning domain is important. It can be easily summarized, but just by saying machine learning is critical to our company. We have millions of productions being made every single day, and we have quite a wide variety of employees who work on implementing machine learning solutions. It's not exclusive to machine learning engineers. We have technical program managers, we have engineers, we have researchers, applied scientists who are all working towards implementing machine learning solutions. That being said, Uber needs a very well-informed and very confident and empowered workforce who feels that they have the tools that they need and are able to implement machine learning solutions into any project or program they're working on that might require it. So our response to filling that need was establishing a formal education program. So beyond just leaving you with the high level kind of anecdote that ML is important, so we wanted to invest in a full scale program, I wanted to go a little bit further with that and call out 4 unique problems that our ML education program solves. So the first being knowledge distribution. I mentioned in the previous slide that we have a small subset of machine learning experts who have depth on unique parts of the machine learning development workflow. So let's say we have experts in the realm of feature engineering, but we have a broader market of users, those TPMs, applied scientists, engineers, product managers that I mentioned, who need to implement machine learning solutions. So we needed a formal channel of distributing the unique knowledge held by our ML experts to Uber's broader internal ML market size. The second problem that a program like this helps solve is addressing issues with model quality. Model quality challenges are not something unique to our company. If you all are familiar with the machine learning domain at all, you know that productionizing an ML model is not a one and done instance. Performance of models need to be continuously monitored, improved, and making sure that owners of those models, our program's users, have the knowledge and the skills that they need to continuously enhance and scale their solutions is critical. User onboarding, like I said, and we'll probably continue to hit home on, machine learning is done differently at Uber. And whether a user is brand new to machine learning and it's a domain that they are just now embarking on and are at a very basic proficiency, or conversely, if we have 10-year experienced machine learning engineers who come to Uber and are using the ML development platform for the very first time, there's a steep learning curve associated with adopting our tooling and workflows, and having an ML education program that curates content in-house helps lessen that learning curve. And lastly, fragmented resources. So it's not that educational initiatives for machine learning did not exist prior to the program's inception. They absolutely did, but they were disparate efforts that lacked structure or accountability. And our program, now serving as the single source of truth for all resources specific to ML, helps address that lack of structure and accountability. So once we realized those motivations and we obtained buy-in for the program, what did we go and get started with? So this slide details what I refer to as path to program. And when I was thinking about what was important to share at the very early stages of the program's journey, these 4 steps came to mind. So right after obtaining buy-in, we assembled a strategic cross-functional steering committee. So this group is referred to as the ML core team, and they remain a very fantastic resource to this day. They helped aid in a lot of strategic decision-making, especially early on in the program's life cycle. We have subject matter experts from other tech learning pockets. We have ML engineers. We have directors from our Uber AI organization that sit on this committee. In addition to having this strategic cross-functional committee, we confirmed a program sponsor within the target domain. And I think the latter part of that sentence is what I really want you to hang on to, is within the target domain. Having somebody who's not just bought into and supportive of the program's mission within the ML domain, but having somebody who can help us prioritize content delivery in alignment with organizational priorities has been critical in the perceived value, therefore success of an initiative like this. We then did a thorough assessment of training needs. And most importantly, we determined what was going to be out of scope for content that this program provided. An example of what's out of scope is anything to do with basic machine learning terminology. So if you have somebody who's a true ML novice and wants to understand what machine learning is, how do you define terms like gradient descent, what is that? We realized that our efforts were probably better suited to welcome in participants after they have that understanding. And we would focus solely on creating content specific to applying machine learning within an Uber specific context. There are lots of great external resources out there that exist already on the basics. So why reinvent the wheel? And then lastly, we launched a few inaugural courses just to validate this concept of a formal education program and validate the frameworks that we had built specifically for content development before we went out loud. So we referred to our Michelangelo team was our haven of beta testers, and we rolled out the first few offerings to that group, got some feedback, and we were able to ensure that our development process for content was solid before we went out more broadly, advertising through many other channels and widening our participant pool. So these 4 things, I think, critically helped contribute to the program's success early on and allowed it to scale so quickly after we kind of got the validation we needed from the beta test. So what I want to focus in on is that last point, launching inaugural courses. In order to do that, we had to standardize a course development workflow. So a lot of the early days work was somewhat of, the laying the foundation with the points I just described, but also making sure that we aced course development, since we knew that we wanted to have a standard that could be extensible across different topics as well as different learning requirements. So this is at a very high level, the course development workflow that we landed on. For those of you who are familiar with instructional design, this is following more so of an ADDIE model. We do bake in a little bit of room for flexibility, specifically through steps 2 through 4. So for maybe more complex topics that require a little bit more iterations and collaboration with other managers, make sure we're on the right track, we'll bake that flexibility in. But in all, we have a 5-step process that takes roughly 2.5 months to build a full-length course offering. And what I think is the coolest part of the development cycle that I just showed you is actually the engineering principles that are embedded within every step of that process. So we were inspired to apply engineering principles to the course development design and the broader program design, knowing that subject matter as complex as ML could do really well having these principles applied at the forefront of what we're building out. Things like reproducibility, for instance, are a challenge in production ML. And knowing that one of the main outcomes we want to have from this program is easing a user's experience when trying to productionize ML solutions, we needed to consider reproducibility as possibly something that would pose challenges for us, because we're developing real world sandbox environments to help teach content that gives skills for people to apply in real time. So these are the 7 engineering principles that we have. I won't go into depth on all of them, but we'll continue on with reproducibility as an example in the next slide. So let's say you're a user of the ML education program and you are attending a training course and you are training a model for the very first time. You'll go through our machine learning platform to do so. And once you train that model, an ML application will kick off. And the ML application will manage its end-to-end execution, usually in the form of a graph. In this graph, each node is containerized using Docker, and it allows us to exactly reproduce the environment in which we are training this model. And if there are any intermediate results, let's say like any intermediate data or model evaluation results that occur, they're snapshotted and then they're stored in this workspace session that you see in this orange box here. In the context of production ML, those artifacts that are snapshotted and stored can be used to plan experiments, and they can be used to reproduce environments for runs. In the context of ML education, those snapshots can be used to create new course materials, or they can be used for when a user wants to reproduce a run that they learned in one of our sessions and apply it to a production environment to help with a project that they are working on in real time. So embedding capabilities like reproducibility into our course design from the onset of our program has helped with the overall effectiveness of the learning offerings that we provide to users. So I realize this is a more technical example. Some less technical examples of how reproducibility is carried out in real time. For our program, things like our live sessions are all recorded, they're versioned, they're stored, so users anytime, anywhere are getting a consistent learning experience and can access those resources and spin up a learning instance whenever they'd like to follow along if they couldn't attend a live session. So to recap, these engineering principles have served us very, very well in making sure that our resources are valuable, especially given the context of the subject matter that we're trying to teach. So to recap, we just walked through the very early days, how we focused on acing content development to help get the program off the ground, how we invested in making sure we were surrounded by other subject matter experts and had people in the right places to aid in strategic decision making at the start. And that has brought us to where we are with ML education today. So at a glance, we provide training, full-length training courses for over 10 different topics within the ML domain. We have 27 instructors globally. I do want to note that instructors is just one of the many ways in which somebody can get involved in supporting the ML education program. So our total number of volunteers is greater than 27. We've facilitated roughly 40 hours of live learning in 2022 so far. And in summary, the program is roughly 3 times greater than what it was during the time frame that I referenced in the getting started period. And then the next 2 slides, I'm going to focus on diving into the content itself. So of those 10 training topics I just mentioned, each of them are comprised of different types of content modules. So keeping extensibility in mind, we wanted to develop a content module library that we could sub up and into different topics as seen fit. So we have several different types of modules, but I thought the 3 most relevant to share with you all were theory, code labs, and getting started packs. So in our theory modules, this is a lecture style module is the best way to put it. We have subject matter experts that are introducing the tools or services or skills that a user will be learning in an anecdotal fashion, and making sure that these concepts are tied back to Uber's broader ecosystem, as well as Uber specific use cases. Code labs are where we facilitate hands-on learning. So the sandbox environment and everything that I was describing previously with reproducibility, this is where all of that comes to the limelight, is during our code lab sessions. These sessions contain some or all of the following things like Jupyter notebooks, usage of Uber specific data sets, template projects or models that users use to embark on their first model training journey, things of that nature. And then lastly, we have getting started packs. These vary per topic, but these were made in direct response to aiding users in bridging that gap between, okay, I just aced this skill set in a sandbox environment. However, I don't quite know where to take my first step in bringing this to a real production use case. And this pack can include things like a step-by-step guide for building their own project in the context of the subject they just learned. It can include troubleshooting resources or help desk channels to help with their production journey, things of that nature. Just to give you all a glimpse of what code labs look like in practice, I took a little screen grab here to show you what our code labs look like. So this is from our Getting Started with Canvas code lab. Canvas is a tool within our Michelangelo platform. And as you see here in the dark boxes, we have commands that folks can copy and paste into their terminal to help build out any local runs. And then we have this green drop down arrow that will provide a user with the expected output, what they should see on their side. Why I think why I pulled this screen grab in particular, so you can see that we're using copy and paste commands to provide a consistent learning experience to guide people through their technical activities, but then also this expected output arrow is really helpful if a user is engaging with this resource offline. So they might not have the instructor guiding them through the journey, and they might choose to not pull up the recording where they would be able to see the instructor walking through that result, but can still, in an offline fashion, pull up the result and check their outputs. So once we have those modules pulled together to make a comprehensive course, a course can be delivered in 3 different ways: live, semi-guided, or online. Live is our longest running format, so our inaugural courses were launched in a live fashion. And since we have expanded to semi-guided and online, live just means that we have instructor resources on the Zoom. Everything's been facilitated virtually to date. So we have instructors on the Zoom that are walking through the different modules and helping troubleshoot via Slack as we go throughout the course. Semi-guided is a blended learning approach. So this is where theory is baked into the hands-on activity rather than being built out into separate modules like was described on the prior slide. This seems to work well for theory, low complexity theory content where a user can be tasked with just reading the high level concepts on their own before jumping into the group hands-on portion. And then online learning is exactly an offline version of the live courses. It's exactly reproducible to what's seen in real time, and it contains similar modules to what we described previously. It can have theory component that's handled online. It can have a hands-on component as well. Shifting away now from content specifically and moving into program operations, this is how we do things today in terms of building to scale. We use tools and templates to streamline things like course initiation, course planning. We use tools to track our course development and make sure that everyone's on the same page and held accountable for deliverables. We have a learning management system that we've used to automate the course enrollment process. This has been a lifesaver compared to how we previously had a very manual process and spreading the word about course offerings, gauging interest, signing people up. So now that we've invested early on automating processes like enrollment, it's freed up so much more time to get to the fun stuff, experimenting with things like office hours, lead initiatives like this monorepo storage that I'm about to jump into. But anything that we've established from a program operations perspective, we've tried to go back with a critical eye towards scale and evaluate how we're doing things and see if there's more automated or standardized ways in which we could do it. This is also where we've leaned heavily on our peer program managers within tech enablement at Uber, constantly knowledge sharing back and forth how they're doing things with their program of a different size and scale and seeing if it's a standard that we can adopt and benefit from. I mentioned fun things like monorepo storage. So this has been a recent advancement that I've been particularly excited about. We've streamlined our user experience and future-proof courses by making sure that all technical assets are stored in Uber's ML monorepo. So this is something that I think has been a huge differentiator for us because so many of our courses have hands-on components. We wanted to make sure that we didn't run a risk of losing technical assets because we had disparate ownership across data sets and making sure that everything's housed under one roof. And many of our participants, when they engage with hands-on activities, are building this mono repo on their local machines anyways. So we streamline their experience by having all of their assets readily available in the mono repo that they are required to build anyways. And lastly, from an operations perspective, we curated an internal brand. And I think this has been a fun and creative means to improve discoverability of program assets. So when we had launched our beta courses and we were ready to go out loud, I wanted to ensure that everything looked and felt the same way. So people could very quickly use our program logo as a visual indicator. Okay, yes, I know that this is an ML education signed, sealed, and approved learning resource before they dive in. So all of our messaging uses this logo, all of our assets use this logo. And I think beyond actually helping with discoverability, it was a really fun initiative that I got to work with the ML core team on. And again, away from content, focusing on another pillar of our program, volunteers. We perceive our program volunteers to be a very prominent part of our program, and we take their sentiment very seriously and consider it to be a major indicator of the program's health. So we expand our view of OSAT to not just include how participants are enjoying our learning offerings and their learning experience, but also from the instructor side. Do they feel like we're working as effectively as we could? Do they feel like their voice is heard? Do they feel like this is supporting their personal and professional goals? So we measure OSAT from the volunteer perspective, and we offer our volunteers a tiered commitment level. So understanding that anybody helping enable this program on the back end of things is doing so outside of their day-to-day responsibilities. So if somebody wants to get involved, but maybe course instruction just isn't for them, or they don't have enough time to devote to course instruction, they can come in as a beta tester. They can help facilitate. We provide that optionality and flexibility to volunteers. So moving on ahead to outcomes and metrics. So we went over how we got started, gave a comprehensive look at what the program looks like today from the perspective of content, as well as our program ops and volunteer pillars. So what outcomes have we realized from that? In terms of statistics, we have a 93% aggregate OSAT across all of the live courses that have been facilitated in 2022. We've had over 600 attendees for our live offerings, and we have over 2,000 unique views of our CodeLab activities. So those are the hands-on modules that are walking individuals through practice scenarios that they might encounter in production ML. And then more anecdotally, some of the outcomes that we've seen that have been really positive. We have users across global tech sites. Towards the latter half of last year and continuing into this year, we spent a lot of time making sure we're engaging global tech sites and that our content roadmap is supporting their local needs and initiatives. And investing in that partnership has yielded a lot of usage from global users. Like we've mentioned, scaled about 3 times in the past 9 months, a lot of that due to process automation, and we're able to rapidly iterate on content. An example of this is we've recently ran a micro-learning instance as a test. Hey, we have modularized our courses. So for a particular use case or initiative, are we able to pull modules from one course here, and spin up an ad hoc offering? We tested that in an incubator environment for a one-off situation, and it proved to work well. So that's just an example of how, with modularity in mind, we're able to rapidly iterate on content, and even if it made sense longer term, spin up ad hoc instances of content to support business initiatives. In the participant realm, we've seen a lot of repeat customers, which that always makes me happy. People are coming back for more. I think that's one of the highest forms of flattery. We catch newbers early. So we've partnered with our technical onboarding program to make sure that Uber engineers or other job profiles working within engineering are introduced to machine learning and introduced to our program within their first week at the company. We get a lot of testimonials coming through of participants saying, hey, I attended this course and was able to put what I learned into production, and in some instances, even greatly moved metrics or realized cost savings for the company. And those are very powerful ways to demonstrate program impact beyond usage numbers or OSAT. And so we're always seeking this testimonial feedback from people who come through our offerings. And we've converted quite a bit of our users into program instructors. So why stop at coming to our courses? We tried to build out a very healthy pipeline of engaged participants to help us support the program's longevity. And in the instructor realm, some of the key outcomes we've seen is that we have repeat volunteers as well. So our retention has been pretty high. On the instructor side, we've seen 2x growth for instructors in 2022. So between Q4 last year and Q1 of this year, doubled in size in terms of our instructors. And then we've also partnered with a few different areas of the business to make sure that internal recognition for instructors is recognized formally by the company rather than just kudos kind of ad hoc fashion. So I'm wrapping up here. I appreciate we've gone through a lot. And so in addition to the learning objectives I stated, so hopefully you're walking away with the understanding of how education can help scale machine learning and as well as an understanding of why applying engineering principles to program design can be valuable for tech learning. In addition to those two things, of everything I've talked about, I would want to leave somebody in the same space with these three things. The first being observability, making sure you think about this very critically early on, as it's difficult to include retrospectively. So making sure that things like usage stats that you might want or need to help communicate the value of your program, making sure that those are available, and if not, are there a way in which you can incorporate observability into any type of project scaffolding, or use Google Analytics instances, things of that nature, to make sure that you are able to capture what you want in terms of data, so you can tell the story of how this program is making a positive impact. Experimentation. So not only, so building courses and program structures with experimentation in mind isn't only just so you're having fun with it. I mean, I think having fun is a very important thing, but making sure that you have incorporated or built a culture of experimentation and an incubator environment that allows you to test new ways of working often, that's going to help your program's success. I mean, I think we've pivoted quite a bit in terms of how we built content, how we deliver content, and we're able to test things very rapidly, like primers before courses and what's the best way to deliver a primer, things like our monorepo initiative, getting all of the volunteers acclimated to a culture of experimentation and stakeholders acclimated to that culture allows you to, within reason, have a great runway and ultimately make sure that a program of this scale is working to the best of its abilities to serve your user base. And lastly, it's more than content. So content is a very important pillar to get right. Don't get me wrong, but it's certainly not the only. And I think in some ways, making sure that you have really thought through and invested in how your program operates structurally, making sure that those standards are set, those templates are created, is going to help aid in a very smooth content creation and delivery process. If you don't have strong volunteer pipelines, if you don't have robust program processes and means for collecting and communicating data to stakeholders, your content very well might not get surfaced. And it's important to balance your investment across those different pillars. And lastly, before I stop and open up for Q&A, I just wanted to note that while cheesy, like a machine learning model, performance of a program like this truly is impacted by the quality of its inputs. And there have been a lot of people that have contributed to the success of a program like this. So wanted to provide a special thanks for the following, or to the following individuals and groups for their contributions. Stephanie Blotner, my manager, a manager of the technical writing team. Michael Mui is a staff software engineer at Uber AI who serves as the engineering kind of one-to-one for this program. Smitha Shyam's our director, or the director of Uber AI, and also is our program sponsor. Our ML core committee, I see Juan Marcano was in the chat earlier. Juan is one of our very reliable committee members, and this program rings of his impact. ML training volunteers, and lastly, Uber's engineering training team. So thank you to everyone who's helped enable this program to be what it is today. And with that, I'll pause, grab some water, and open for Q&A.
Awesome talk, Brooke. Thank you. Thank you. I love what resonated for me is this marriage of sort of engineering craft with instructional design and kind of like bringing that together. I think Jade Locke had an observation that you're kind of bringing ADDIE model for instructional design and kind of merging it with agile model of software development. So I thought that was pretty cool to see how that works together. So awesome. I'll pick up a couple of questions from the chat. There's Stuart had a few questions about just the size, like the scale, like how big is your team, how big is your market, like meaning how big is the ML educational team, and how many people are you serving internally? It sounds like it's serving beyond just the ML people in the company. And then what does it take for somebody to qualify to partake in the program? Does it have to be an ML engineer, or is it open to everyone? That sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that, Silvana. So when we're talking about our market, it's somewhat tiered. So I think a stretch goal, or I guess more of a vision statement, is that anyone at Uber who will be coming in contact with an ML solution, whether it be a director guiding their team on implementing their first ML solution, or whether it be a product manager overseeing an initiative that has an element of machine learning, you name it, anybody who's touching ML, we consider to be a part of our market size for users. But that's a large, and if I'm being honest, somewhat ambiguous market, because we have different teams implementing ML solutions for the first time, or maybe somebody on the applied science side who is taking an initial analysis to development for the very first time. So that number fluctuates, but that's kind of our mission level view. And then more granularly, we prioritize model owners of our some of our model sets. So that's a much smaller and I guess you could say controlled group. So that's our scale in terms of audience. When we're talking about scale on the program side, so I handle end-to-end strategy and execution. And then we have that team of 27 instructors who also help aid in designing courses. At a course development level, if we're spinning up a new topic, anywhere from, I would say, 2 to 5 subject matter experts is beneficial. For some topics, having more people on staff to help create that course content is beneficial, because maybe it's complex, it's a heavy lift, so we'll need to distribute load accordingly. For other topics, maybe it's exceptionally nuanced and there are only a few resources who are really close to what the scope of the content should be. So maybe in those instances, it's more appropriate to work with 2 engineers to outline and build. It varies on the program side of how we're allocating course developer resources to new topics. And then live instances, it just depends. So we'll typically train up and onboard, say, 5 instructors to a topic at a time, and we'll rotate out roles and responsibilities, and we'll also have maybe 2 nominated, but some on standby to help troubleshoot during the hands-on portions if we seem to get an influx of questions. So I hope that helps give a better idea of how things are scaled out.
And so yeah, so Stuart is asking ballpark size of the target audience, couple hundred people. What are we talking about? Any comments on that, Brooke? Just in terms of how many people are a part of the department?
Oh, sure. Sorry, a part of the machine learning department, or on the L&D side?
I believe the target audience that you would be serving with the ML education. So it doesn't have to be, it can span beyond Uber AI. Yeah.
So, so target audience, like I mentioned, the broader market size is roughly around, I think we have a stat around 2,000 or so users of the ML platform Michelangelo. So anybody touching that platform, we would want to be aware of our course offerings. But then we have more granular targets within that broader ML market size that are a smaller subset.
Got it. And I know there were a few questions about this 27 volunteers, instructors that teach. So obviously they're volunteers, right? They have other jobs, and so this is just the in addition to everything else they're doing. And you touched on the fact that you are rewarding them beyond just the learning, right? I feel like you're partnering up with other parts of the business to reward, to acknowledge or recognize the instructors. Any tips or tricks? What resonates? What works specifically? How do you get them to basically do what they do, the instructors?
Yeah. Well, I would say, thankfully, I've been very fortunate in the fact that we have very passionate group of volunteers. So of that 27, there are actually a few individuals that had signed up that we just didn't have room to deploy them to offerings. So I have kind of an opposite problem of motivating people to get involved, which I'm really thankful for. But that said, we definitely don't want to take those resources for granted. So some of the, I'll talk about a few different ways that we make sure instructors feel appreciated and recognized. The first being making sure that I am tracking personal contributions of each instructor, and I am sharing that out to their direct managers at the time of perf and promo. So that's done at a mid-year and end of year cadence. So Juan, for example, has Juan has been on the receiving end of, I'll say, hey, Juan's been involved in this program in the past 6 months. These are his highlights. So he developed this resource that, received this OSAT, or he helped with this repo migration initiative that's improved our user onboarding experience by X. And that's signed off not just by me, but our program sponsor. So that means a lot. We also try to give volunteers preference of what they want to work on. So if they're an expert in a certain topic, we'll try to recruit them for that. Conversely, if they're not an expert in a certain topic and they would like to learn by doing, learn by creating, we are happy to partner eager engineers who might not be a subject matter expert in feature engineering, let's say, with a feature engineering expert to build a new course. So I think that is an angle we try to provide a lot of flexibility on, making sure the volunteer is volunteering in a way that is best suiting their personal and professional goals. And then lastly, from a more formal kind of company recognized perspective, we worked with our HR business partners to have the latest iteration of the software engineering IC competencies that are used to evaluate perf and promo, to include explicit language around technical learning and development. So it doesn't necessarily say if so-and-so creates something for ML education program, it's generalized. So it is applicable across all of the tech enablement programs and things like writing documentation. But that was a huge win and something that we worked on towards the latter half of last year that just got passed at the beginning of this year. So we're really excited that now we can say, it's less of that, hey, we're going to try to influence in a workaround way your perf and promo outcomes, but we can say working on this while outside of your day-to-day is contributing to your competencies that you're evaluated on.
I want to add something to that.
Yeah.
So I don't know why Uber is very specific with what it wants to see from engineers at their particular levels or the levels below or above. And so we have specific line items, and by participating in a program and depending on what you do, you can say, hey, with this, I demonstrate this because this is the impact and these are the numbers and yada, yada, yada. So it's not that we want to encourage people to do this to get promoted or so on and so forth, but if we can reward people who have put in the time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, why not? Because I see that was one of the things attracting a lot of people in the past.
Yeah, it's super cool how you formalized sort of that feedback loop into rewarding people and acknowledging them and doing it formally through recognition on the promo committee and all that. Yeah, so I've seen that elsewhere as well. So it seems to work. So it seems to be a best practice. So super useful. There were other questions as well. There was namely some, I think a lot of nodding to how you develop content, including code labs, and there's a lot of magic and stuff to unpack there, and how you make the content be modular and maintainable, and kind of using all these engineering principles to content kind of almost building the content as if it was code. I thought that was magical. I know we're sort of close to time, but any quick thoughts you want to share on that, or we can also have this conversation via Slack as well. And I know tomorrow we can share a link to join Slack for those who haven't. But any closing thoughts on that, Brooke? Content and content creation and maintainability.
Yeah, so just quick, fast, in a hurry on the note of templates. I am a template fanatic, and not in the sense of forcing documentation just to kind of clutter someone's desk, but using documentation as a way to make everything super crisp and consistent. So I would say generally, if you have a step in a process, there can be a template for that. So I would just say, even going through the exercise of looking how you're working now and trying to put a lens around, is this repeatable? Do we often suffer driving clarity and buy-in around this particular part in building a course? If yes, maybe a template could be of good use. From experience, I think templates around the course initiation and planning processes can be really key, especially when you have such a wide stakeholder map. So course initiation, we have a form that if somebody wants to nominate a training topic, they have to go through an exercise of submitting a little bit more detail around the target audience, a potential KPI for what business metric this course might help move. And it helps me aid in discussions I have with the program sponsor on getting a subject prioritized. An example of where this came into play and worked really well, we just had a course for debugging that was not initially a part of our curriculum stack come up towards the end of last year through this topic submission form that I had enough detail through that template to where I could have an intelligent conversation with our sponsor, and it actually surpassed all of the other content pieces on our roadmap. So that process can be often ambiguous, especially as more people come through these courses and find out what you're doing. They might want to raise a hand and say, hey, can you spin up something for me or for this use case? So templatizing that process is key. And then second to that, once it's the topic's nominated and you move into planning, getting a very clear course spec in order, where you have scope, what's in scope, what's out of scope, and this is what you use during your very first course development meeting. You get that signed off and approved and use that as ground truth when you are building out the broader course. Because when you're building out a 2.5-hour course, it can be very easy to fall victim to scope creep. That spec kind of helps you stay within parameters. And then lastly, a stakeholder map, especially if you're navigating a semi-ambiguous market size of, any user touching your platform, a stakeholder map of points of contact would be really, really helpful. And sorry for overtime.
Yeah, and I know, and it sounds like there's a whole other presentation on how to approach the instructional design here. So we can and tooling. So we can talk about that separately and/or move the conversation to Slack. Thank you so much, Brooke. Awesome presentation. Thanks for sharing what you've done, and I'm sure people will have more questions for you. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and happy to chat on Slack. Thanks everyone for taking the time.
Thank you all.